So let's design a jewel together to find out the real answer to that fantastic question. First, and the most important element of jewels is that a jewel, by definition, we'll talk about that some other day, but a jewel, by definition, must be usable on some part of the body, of the human body. Because we're not going to design a jewel for my cats just now. We could, we'll do that someday. The body is the measure of the jewel. And we are going to design a ring. It must fit on the fingers. It can be also on the foot. So if it's going to be a ring, I need a finger size. And that's just a circle. Finger size number 9.
Jewelry and Jewelry Design 001.
So now that I know the size, well, basically I can do whatever I want. We already talked about that. My ring can be any shape, can be any color, can be any material, because that's really what it is. Jewelry design is about any shape, any material, any color you want. There's no limit, because actually gold jewelry is a very specific segment of the jewelry world, of the jewelry industry. It's a very specific segment, but it's not the only segment, because taking anything, any object, and wearing it anywhere on the body, that's already jewelry, and that's already jewelry design. And guess what? The first jewels were not made of gold and gemstones at all. Just remember, jewels are made of any materials. So making a ring design with my socks is not crazy at all. Many of you will laugh, but obviously, and then we have jewelry branches. By example, contemporary jewelry is in fact the oldest jewelry in the universe. Making jewelry with any material for any part of the body. That's now called contemporary jewelry, but that's historic jewelry, because the first jewels were made of anything you could find. So now it's called contemporary jewelry. Irony, and obviously we can just but laugh about it.
It's when we can laugh at our life's problems that we find the best answers.
Cats and people, let's design a jewel right here, right now. Inspiration for a jewel. The idea for the shape. It can be round, it can be square, it can be triangular, any shape. Why this one? Why that one? Because I like it? Because I fancy so? Well, sadly, that's the answer of almost any jewelry designer you can find. That's a poor decision. Oh, I like it round. Oh, I like it square. Oh, I like it triangular. Because I like it. Because I fancy so. No, that's too poor. That's the poorest decision you can have. On the scale of design, designing is not about your ego or the client's ego, just by the way. The jewelry designer's real job is to find the best reason to shape something specifically, to understand that in practice. So now, let's make some real jewelry design. So, it's going to be a ring, yes?
Let's use a standard size.
So this is size 9, all right? First element, measures, every time. Great. Now, well, you need an idea. So obviously that's where people say, well, just get an idea and that's it. Like, let's make a flower, let's make a butterfly, drawing some gemstones or shape, not exactly the way it goes. Okay, so I'm a Sagittarius. That's a starting point. By example, I can start with my zodiac sign to use something that many people can relate to. So the symbol of Sagittarius has an arrow somewhere. It's one of the best way to represent the Sagittarius. So that means that my ring will have an arrow somewhere. It's necessary. And here you can already see the difference. The word itself, it's necessary. A Sagittarius ring without an arrow somewhere in the design will never represent a Sagittarius. Well, I didn't make the world, I didn't make the symbols. Know your culture. That's fundamental for any designer, not only jewelry designers, any designers. Great. So, and I'll have an arrow. So now also Sagittarius is a fire sign, fire element. So somehow I need to represent the fire. So now, very bad jewelry companies manufactured very bad jewelry designers are going to use the shape of the fire like the flame. But that's not really part of the Sagittarius symbol. It's the element. So that's more abstract. Okay, so a good designer, and we are good designers, we're not going to use the shape of the fire in the design. We're going to use the concept of fire. So now, how can I do that? In jewelry, yellow gold represents, you guessed it, the sun, and by connection represents fire. But also represents the masculine element. And that's very interesting because the arrow shape is a very strong masculine element. I don't make the symbols. I didn't make the world. Know your culture. So we have sun, yellow gold, fire, arrow, Sagittarius. Great. That's something the design needs to have. If I use silver trying to represent the sun and fire, well, I would be just
A wrong.
jewelry designer. Not even a bad one, but just
A wrong.
one. Okay? That's how it goes. That's your job, actually. You don't know it? Well, learn about it. Jewelry design is a very specific design segment and requires as much as knowledge as possible. Believe me. The more you know, the better you design jewels. Because
140,000 years.
of human history, of cultures, religions, all the symbols, all the materials, all the colors, they all bring some cultural connection, some knowledge, some very ancient knowledge inside the designs. There's no mistake, there's no luck in a good design. There's just a lot of knowledge and a lot of culture, okay? So that's also why training is so hard. If you want to make a house, get an architect. If you want to make a jewel, get a jeweler, a jewelry designer. This is the way. I was born and raised between Mexican and Swiss culture, so the concept of having opposites and contrasts. Now, the sun, the moon, the arrow, the sphere, great, yellow gold, silver. As we all know, silver represents femininity in the metal realm. So silver, the moon, the shape, the sphere, and obviously the sphere is a very good contrast to the triangle, to the arrow. So here we can have a much greater dimension taking place in this design. So now the question is, because obviously the arrow is going to make the body of the ring in yellow gold. So now I would like to use the moon, the sphere, the femininity in my design. The jewelry designer must ask himself is where I'm going to put this element. Here to the side, here, down here, up there, where? Because the position of the element is the composition of the element, as in each art form, you need to put things somewhere and the composition must be meaningful. Otherwise, you're just making a tasteless, meaningless metal and gemstone soup. That's exactly what any jewelry designer must avoid, making tasteless metal and gemstone soup. Don't do that. That's the mistake that the industry makes. People designing and making jewelry make. So few people are really interested in designing jewelry, in creating something that makes sense, really an art form, really taking the jewelry design work as something very serious and very meaningful. So few people the right way. I didn't make the world. I won't change the world. Do it as you want. Because once you know, it will be your responsibility to do it differently, the right way. So, where do I put the sphere? I have an entire circle where to put my sphere. But guess what? What happens if I put the sphere right up there, in the middle, at the top? Well, that would be quite interesting. You know what? Because, by example, let's take the Taoistic idea of the universe. Well, the universe is feminine. So it would be quite correct to put the feminine element up there. And also remember, we are all born from a woman. The sphere is going to be the feminine mother element right up there. And what I'm going to do is that I was born, I just said that, so we're going to use that in the design. I was born from a woman, so I'm coming out So the arrow is going to come out. There's the element, we are going to see the element come out into fire, you know, the trial of fire, the Sagittarius, the masculine element, the sun, they're coming out. So that's very important. And now what's going to happen is that the arrow is going to make all the way around and come back to the feminine element. But obviously, I won't be coming back to my mother because that's not the way things go. This is not an Oedipian complex story. This is the story of life. So you come out, you go through the trials of life, make the natural circle, and you fall in love with a woman. You have children, and the story starts again. The cycles starts all over again. And now that we're at it, let me still mention two elements that I can make more interesting still. I talked about the natural cycle of life. You're born, you fall in love, it all starts again. All right? So it means that there is a direction to this movement. So I need something dynamic in my design. And guess what? I can very well use the arrowhead. An arrow mostly have one arrowhead, and that's it. But if things are in movement, what I can do is like a stop motion, the arrowhead 3 times. That would be a great idea. 3 times right there to express the movement, a cycle in progress. And expressing movement in art and in jewelry design is always very interesting. Now also a final touch, because like I said, always think like a jeweler, and the jeweler manufactures, makes the jewel with his hands. So you must always think about making the jewel in real life. That's why I think as a jeweler first. That's why I study jewelry making first. Then you will design jewels the right way for very obvious reasons. So the finishing touch and textures to the metals, because for the fire we can have rose gold, the arrowhead's going to be yellow gold, and the moon, the sphere, is going to be silver. So obviously everything could be polished, but because I was talking about contrasts, the sun, the moon, what I can do when finishing the ring is obviously polish the arrow. The fire is very bright, it's very strong, it's the sun, it's the movement, and the sphere, the silver sphere, can very well have a satin finish or even a bit of moon texture to it. With a satin finish, it will look also like a pearl. So pearls also are very feminine. Silver, you can see it's a full, complete meaning, technical, cultural, artistic, inside a design to complete the contrasts between the elements in the finishing touch of the master jeweler. And that's exactly why think of the exact finishing processes that you're going to give to the jewel. Isn't that great? And this is a ring design. This is jewelry design. And now you're all witnesses of how the jewelry design process really works and really goes. And that's exactly my job as a jewelry designer. And also, obviously, I wanted to make this video for also a very specific reason. Most of the design you see me publish on social media, most of the time, these are not jewelry designs. They are just tasteless soups. Most clients, they don't care because that's the soup they're used to. They want the same jewels that they see on TV, in fashion magazines. We're all part of the chain of fools. That's why I wanted to explain and to show you there's a lot more in the job that I do as a jewelry designer. The jewelry industry always makes the same tasteless soup, and the business is always the same. But there's also a great part that you'll never get to see. But today, I'm happy that I made this video because genuinely you can see there's a lot more than meets the eyes. When my friends laughed at me because I was tagged as a superficial person, because most of the time people consider jewelers to be very vain, very superficial persons because we're dealing with bling bling and money and superficial life. Many people think that there's no culture in the jewelry field, in the jewels, in making jewels and designing jewels. I fulfilled my full responsibility to share that part of my knowledge, and now you're witnesses. Now you know. Most of the time, people decide to ignore it, to minimize it. Well, obviously, there's a lot you need to process right now. You have a lot to do, you have a lot to meditate, you have a lot to learn. This is the way. Thanks for listening. Take care and see you soon.